All right, good morning, everyone. If you'll take your seats, please turn your phones on silent or vibrate, whatever you prefer, and I welcome you all to the December 19th Hewlett meeting here at the County of Santa Clara, and our final Hewlett meeting of 2019. Seems like it was November a week ago, and in like 10 days it's January. Amazing. So we'll start with a call to order. Mr. Rocha, Frank, if it's all right with you, if they each say their name and their title so the audience knows, and that way you can take roll at the same time. Super. Don, can you kick us off?
Sure. Don Rocha, Director of Parks and Recreation Department.
Joe Zintek, Director, Consumer and Environmental Protection Agency.
Good morning. My name is Harry Freitas. I'm the Director of the Roads and Airports Department.
Jacqueline Unshano, Director of Planning and Development.
Mike Wasserman, District 1 Supervisor.
County Supervisor Joe Simitian. Thank you.
Sylvia Geigus, Deputy County Executive.
Steve Mitra, Assistant County Counsel.
Thank you all very much. Move on to item 2 of our agenda, which is public comment, which is your opportunity to speak about anything not on today's agenda. And I have one speaker card. If you want to do that, we ask you to fill out a speaker card, leave it in the depository there, and our clerk, Frank, will pick it up. So item number... Yes, he's getting that. Thank you. Kathy Helgerson, come on up. And is there anybody else wishing to speak on item number 2, public comment? Again, anything not on today's agenda. Seeing nobody else, let's set the timer for 3 minutes.
Does this thing work?
And we'll go with that. Yes, it does. Good morning. You can start.
Hi. Okay. I think Santa Clara County has some very serious issues about the staff. And I've complained in writing. Jack knows. Robert knows. Joe knows, everybody knows, and no one's doing anything and nobody's contacted me about any of the paperwork that I sent in. I have been reviewing a lot of paperwork on all kinds of issues, but one thing that really stands out is the policies and procedures that we're using here at the county. And also, I would like to have stakeholder meetings, which I've been talking about, and we need to sit down and discuss not just the issues that are on the agenda right now, but other things that need to be done. I think it's time that instead of 3 minutes, we start stretching things out. People need to speak. We're not getting enough time. I'm bringing this up in oral communication. I also would like a televideo audio conferencing system set up between the cities and Santa Clara County so we don't have to come down here. We're in a high technology valley here. The Silicon Valley is noted for so much, and here we are having to truck ourselves down here, having to truck ourselves to San Francisco, Oakland, the capital. This is ridiculous. It's time that you guys who are in charge spend the money and connect. The city of Cupertino and the other cities would be probably grateful, and also the gridlock on the freeways is horrible. People going to San Francisco. We need transit. We need trains going up there. We don't need cars going up there. This is what you guys have to start working on. I am tired. 17 years of dealing with this. And I've lived in this valley for 35 years, and I am sick. I am sick physically from the pollution to the air, water, and soil here. And not to mention the cars are contributing to this, and the trucks. And I come down, I won't even take Highway 1 over here. The exit. I go on to the Alameda because I don't want to deal with that gridlock over there. What are you guys going to do? And I'll say all this and you'll do nothing. You won't respond. You won't send me an email. You won't assign somebody to me. You won't comment. This is not right. You guys, when someone takes the time to come here and comment, you need to respond with some kind of a letter. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your contribution. We don't get that. That's disrespectful. I am very upset. Extremely upset. Something has to change here, and I am working very hard to get it changed. Yeah, and I've got a lot of other paperwork and information to provide to you guys, and it's coming in. And I'm waiting for reports from the Water Board and the EPA, and I'm waiting for reports from the Air District that are not Title V. Nothing's happening here. This is your job to protect us from pollution. It's killing us. People are dying. The land is dying. Lehigh and all these other polluters are killing us. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, need to caution you. We don't. What we try and do is provide a I'll call it a safe environment here, because there's some people that share one perspective on an item and others that feel differently about it. So I want to discourage and frankly not permit any clapping, booing, hissing, that kind of thing, positive or negative. That way anybody coming here will feel safe and comfortable expressing their opinion. Thank you very much. Are you Rhonda Fry?
I'm Rhoda.
Rhoda Fry, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Welcome, Rhoda.
Thank you for having me. I'd rather be shopping and generating taxes for the county. I'm here for a non-agenda item, although it is Lehigh related, about an EPA settlement with Lehigh nationwide to reduce air emissions of thousands of tons of pollutants. And I'm here to ask you to please comment on the consent decree. As you may well know, BACMed in 2011 did a study that found that reducing particulate matter in Santa Clara County would save nearly $1 billion. Now that's back in 2011. So what this agreement does, it plans to reduce NOx and SOx, which contribute to particulate matter, which contribute to respiratory cardiovascular disease and premature death.
Excuse me, Frank, can you stop her time for just a minute? Rhoda, a question for you. The item that you're speaking on now, are you speaking on item 6 regarding the quarry?
I will repeat, this is a non-agenda item. It is related to this EPA agreement is not on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much.
So,
please continue.
All right, but thank you.
You bet.
So pertaining to, so the thing to consider is that the EPA measures pollution on a per ton of clinker, which is a product. It's kind of like a precursor to cement, rather than per person. So if you look at Lehigh to Tehachapi, which is also in California, of course, you've got 300.
Excuse me again. Hank, could you start her timer? Thank you, Frank.
You've got 382 people within 3 miles of that plant. In Cupertino, you've got about 50,000 people within 3 miles of that plant. So what the EPA is proposing to do is for Cupertino, they would be allowed 2 pounds per ton of clinker, whereas Tehachapi, you got 1.5 pounds. So it's over 33% more. And I'd like to see those numbers go down. Better numbers are good, lower numbers are better. Now I want to talk about sulfur dioxide. This is really frightening. State of California, the number 2 polluter, stationary source polluter for sulfur in the state of California is Lehigh Cupertino, accounting for 13% of sulfur in the state of California. And they are also accounting for nearly half of the sulfur across all cement plants. So what's happening in this agreement with respect to sulfur? The EPA is saying for many of the plants, they can go down to 0.4 SOx per ton of clinker. For Cupertino, hey guys, start at 2.1 pounds. And if your product quality suffers, that's okay. We'll negotiate and you can pollute more. That's not acceptable. So I just want to close and say, please comment. The due date is January 10, and I have some handouts here. It's just one page that you can share amongst you, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Rhoda. And before you sit down and supervise the committee, and I see that your light is on, you want to speak, just one bit of clarification for you on the shopping, which I encourage you to do and make a lot of people happy. The sales taxes basically go to the city. The county gets a small percentage of property taxes, but I just wanted you to know that. The city appreciates your spending.
Well, I'd love to spend money at the city, too. Of
There
course,
you go.
unfortunately, Valco has met an unfortunate demise, and all the jobs that are there have gone away.
I got you, but that's a topic another day.
Happy holidays to
Thank
all
you.
y'all.
You as well. That closes the public comment portion of our agenda. Supervisor Simidian?
Thank you, Supervisor Wasserman. If I could ask the planning staff through the chair to Ms. Anchano and also the county counsel's office to take a look at the opportunities for comment on the decree that was described and consider whether and what we might do to weigh in. I'll just make that request through the chair.
Absolutely. Thank you. And
Thank
I
you
see Jacqueline nodding her head. In agreement? Yes? Thank you very much. That concludes item number 2, which is public comment. Item 3 is to approve consent calendar items and changes. On our agenda today, Supervisor, we have items 9 through 12. Looking for a motion of changes, additions, or approval.
Move approval of the consent calendar as contained in our published agenda.
Thank you. I agree with that as well. So items 9 through 12 are approved. Is there anyone here? I don't have any cards. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak on items 9 through 12 on today's consent? Seeing none, we'll move on with the regularly scheduled agenda. Item number 4, under advisement from the August 2019 meeting of the Board of Soups, receive report from the Office of Sustainability relating to consideration of options to reduce the effects of climate change, including tree planting. And I believe Jasneet Sharma, welcome. And this is our new director, and we welcome you to your first meeting. Oh, you got to turn that microphone on.
I'm trying to figure that out.
There you go. Welcome, Jasmeet.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
That's
can.
great. Thank you so much. So again, I'm Jasneet Sharma. I'm the new director for the Office of Sustainability at the County of San Mateo, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Santa Clara County.
What did I say?
You said San Mateo.
So sorry.
I'm going to have to call you
I-
Rook.
That is probably not a good way to start my first meeting
No,
with
but
you
it was
all
nice
today.
knowing you. It was very nice knowing you. Yes.
It is years of habit of working for San Mateo County. I promise you I will not do that again.
I get that. All right, that's wonderful.
For the record, I represented San Mateo County in the state legislature for 12 years, and they're lovely people,
Thank you
just
so
to
much.
be clear. Okay.
But that doesn't excuse
But
the
they
mistake.
don't have a
so-
football team, and they're not Santa Clara County.
It just rolls off my tongue, but I will work on it.
Thank you. Good catch.
Vanessa Marquez, Interim Sustainability Manager.
So the report that you have in front of you today, we were asked to respond to a referral from the August 27th board meeting on consideration of options to reduce the effects of climate change. Specifically, what we wanted to do was respond to some of the environmental stewardship goals as a way to show how the county is responding or planning or preparing for climate change. And there was a specific response in there required for planting trees, which is the environmental stewardship goal number 10, providing shuttle for county employees to and from Diridon Station during peak commute hours, to encourage the use of public transportation, and then policy for air travel for county employees. As you'll see, this report specifically responds to the first two requests, just laying out some of the efforts that are underway and then responding to the tree planting request. We will be working on, or actually have laid out what other work is happening on the employee shuttle programs, and also a plan that we are trying to put in place for responding to you on the air travel policy aspect. Any questions or?
Turn to my supervisor. Supervisor Smitty, any questions on this particular item?
Forgive me, just one quick question that I didn't get a chance to ask before the meeting, and which is on packet page 2 of 4 on our environmental stewardship goals. There are bulleted points there. The number 2, per capita energy use in 2018 decreased 13.6% compared to 2008 baseline. And I'm just curious if somebody knows, is that for the residents of the unincorporated county, or is that per capita as in for per capita for the number of our employees? Is that a county organization number, or is that a county resident number in some way?
Sure. I would have to look more into that to answer that question for you, but just off the top of my head, I know it's specifically the energy use for our own operations, so that's our buildings and facilities, but I can certainly double check to confirm that I'm giving you the right response.
Thank you. It just off agenda will be fine.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, Mr. Chairman, if you would like, I'm happy to simply move approval or receipt, rather, move to receive the report, which I believe is all that's asked for today.
Thank you. Before we do that, we do have a speaker.
Good.
And Frank, if you'll turn our clock to 2 minutes and ask Kathy Helgerson to come on up.
There's not that many people here, so I don't know why you're just giving me 2 minutes, but par for the course, right? Okay, trees have to do with helping us to clean up the air. Climate change, it's global climate change disaster that we're facing. And I won't go into all the polluters, but I'll mention that these polluters destroy 30,000 trees and 600 acres. Not to mention what we chop down in our counties and states. And then we go around trying to plant these little trees that take years and years and years to grow. We need to stop doing this. We need to get involved with the CO2 emissions that certain companies here in the valley do not even have to report their CO2 emissions, and that is wrong. It is affecting the trees, the plants, the ground, the grass, everything's dying. And then we have a huge drought that we have to face now that's coming up this year, 2020. And what are we going to do about this? I think it's time that we realize that we cannot keep destroying the planet, that we have to do something about this. This is a global issue, not just here. I would like someone here that's assigned to this committee here to look at the global issues and set up stakeholder meetings and talk to the public about what's important here. Bring our children in grade schools, in the high schools, in the colleges to come in and talk to us. They're the next generation. You're doing nothing to notify them. Okay, if it wasn't for the web, I don't know what we would do. If it wasn't for computers, I don't know what. It's been 100 years that the pollution has been here in this valley, and it's getting worse, and it's causing fires. And this is what's happening. The planet is rebelling. It is rebelling against this pollution. We are going to have earthquakes and all kinds of catastrophes. You need to stop doing what you're doing and concentrate on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. And Supervisor, I heard your motion earlier, so we'll consider this item received. We move on to item number 5, which is subject matter, let's see, regarding the correspondence from the Airports Commission. Received report relating to recommendations from the Airport Commission regarding Reid-Hillview Airport and forward to the Board of Supes for consideration. Harry, who's addressing or taking comments?
This item was brought onto the agenda by the Airport Commission.
Okay.
They've reviewed our correspondence with the FAA and our correspondence back regarding issues that the FAA has with wayfinding on the ground at Reid-Hillview Airport, and they have forwarded essentially a request to the Hewlett Committee, I assume at the Hewlett Committee's discretion, then to pass on to the Board of Supervisors for the airport, Roads and Airports Department to fund a project to improve those items identified in the original FAA correspondence.
All right, thank you very much for that. Supervisor Smitty, do you have any comments? Otherwise, I have some comments.
I may have a comment or two in a moment, Supervisor Wasserman, but I think I'd like to defer to you for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, do I have any speaker cards on this item? Maybe one being delivered right here. Frank, is that on this item? 5? CH, is this Kathy? Halders? Come on up.
Do I get 2 minutes again? Okay. The reason I came up when I saw this was we're talking about airports. The jet emissions are not being regulated. You need to look at this as a county because it adds to all the pollution that's here from the major polluters that we've been talking about. But when you look at that, it's all of this eventually blows out up through Hayward and Fremont and goes all the way up north. And this is where the wind carries everything. We have to look at that also. If we were to shut down some of the major polluters, that wouldn't be so bad. You know, the airports, maybe they could do what they're doing. I don't like what they're doing. They need to be regulated. I will be looking into more of this. It's hard to find time for everything. I don't have a staff. I'm all alone, except for a few volunteers, advocates that have their own issues and agendas sometimes. Is there anything that the Santa Clara County can look into talking to the major airlines and trying to figure out if there's any better technologies out there that can control these emissions, because they're adding to what's going on here in the Valley. It's really bad. It's going to get worse. We're getting more people in here. More people want to live here. We're turning everything into mega cities, mega counties. This is going to happen. We have to do all kinds of different things. We have to use our heads, and we have to use more technology. Bring young people in with all these great ideas and sit down and listen to them and see what they can do. There's all kinds of things they can do. And the airlines, if they're being fined, they're not being fined, and they are very rich. So if they're polluting, we need to fine them. And that money should be used to develop new technologies and work with the young people here in the Valley. So please try to do something like that. I've really suggested a lot of ideas and things that I never hear from anybody from the county. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That concludes the public portion. Supervisor Smitty, did you say you wanted to make comments, or you want to hear? Okay, thank you. For myself, the county airports we're talking about, Reid-Hillview Airport and San Martin Airport, and the concern I have, and I'll address this, Harry, to you or Sylvia's director over Harry. I have emails, notifications from our airport commission, the FAA, Caltrans, and pilots regarding various safety issues and concerns that they've identified. And as I've said before publicly, having knowledge goes along with liability. And my concern here is the multiple sources of information that we have, and I guess, Steve, I should be speaking to you as well, too, from a legal standpoint. Again, letters from the Airport Commission, the FAA, Caltrans, pilots, emails, et cetera, bringing up various safety issues. And I need these things addressed. I need them responded to directly. Going through Hewlett first would be my preference before they go on to the board. I need to know what we're doing about what and when on these various issues. If some items have been addressed, great. If some items are in the hopper to be addressed, great. If some items you disagree that don't need improving, great. I just need to know that. And when I say I mean myself, as one of the airports is in my district, but also as a supervisor and chair of Hewlett. I'd like Hewlett to get a response back from whatever source is appropriate to each and every concern that has been raised regarding the airports. Also, what I'd like to get back would be, and I'm assuming there are several issues that need to be addressed because we've heard from so many people, is how we're going to fund these improvements, how we're going to take care of them. I know right now a couple of things are happening. One, it was a majority of the board on a 3-2 not to accept federal funding. That's where we are right now. I know also that we're doing a lead study now, waiting for that report to come back. Those are things in progress. But what I need to see is I need to see a plan. I need to see which of these areas of concern, these safety issues, as each person has called them, that we're going to address, what we're going to do, and how we're going to pay for them. Is it going to be a request from roads and airports for supplemental funding from the general fund? Is it going to be suggesting if the CEO or the board says no to general funding, we revisit receiving federal funding? Can you receive federal funding for one airport and not the other without getting us into this 20-year clock starting again? I need to know what we're doing. So I'm expressing to Harry, to Sylvia, my concerns, because what I have now is knowledge. And I kind of compare this, Steve, to when I talked about somebody trips and falls in a parking lot I manage, and I didn't know there was a problem. Not so liable. If I'm told there's a problem, that there's a pothole there, and do nothing about it over a reasonable period of time, I see liability with that. So those are my concerns, Supervisor, and I'm being as specific as I can be.
Thank you. I believe, Mr. Mitra, that's referred to in California as the every dog is entitled to one free bite doctrine, meaning the first time your dog bites, you were unaware of the fact that he had a propensity to bite. After he has bitten someone, you are aware of the fact that he has a propensity to bite, and you are on notice, and your liability increases. So Point made and taken. I think the only thing I would add, Mr. Chairman, is to say that, and if you'd like to do this formally as a committee action, I'd certainly be happy to support it, make the motion if you like.
Please.
I think it would be helpful for the administration and for the committee if we gave very clear direction that we would direct the administration to specifically consider the FAA letter in the preparation of our fiscal year 21 budget, and that and the county's response, which Mr. Freitas has mentioned, to indicate what's on the to-do list, and that that both the FAA letter and the county's response letter be considered in the context of the fiscal year 21 budget to ensure that that budget identifies and funds necessary projects at Reid-Hillview. And so if you'd like that as a motion so that it's of record as a direction from the committee, I'm happy to provide it.
Thank you for that motion. I'll make a friendly amendment to that we, the FAA letter is one, our very own Airports Commission letters concern. We have letters from pilots. We have letters from Caltrans. I'd like to see all of that addressed, simply responded to. Think of it as a grand jury report, if you will. I've been here 10 years now, and we get grand jury reports, and we respond, agree, disagree, and we've done something. And I would like to know what we've done about these things that have made me aware of issues at the airports.
I think that I'm happy to incorporate that. I think that may be a separate and distinct issue in terms of getting back a response. I'm really looking to the budget process as a way to say, to your point, Mr. Chairman, there was a vote of the board. The board said, let's not take the grants anymore by a 3-2 majority. Fair enough. So then the obvious question is, what's still on the to-do list that either is essential, necessary, and different folks will have different interpretations of that. I understand that. But I think in order to get some action on the things that you are expressing concern about, and where I would, in many instances, share the concern, directing the budget process now, before that budget gets too fully developed, directing the budget process now to consider the FAA's letter and the response letter from Roads and Airports, and I'm happy to say, and other communications on the subject from interested
Great.
parties. And then I think if you would like, I'm also happy to provide direction for a sort of a report back at some point as to sort of what the response is on each item that's more fully developed than what we've been able to get to date. And if you have a date in mind, I don't know if that's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months from now. We'll obviously be looking at the budget in June, so that'll give us a marker on what staff thinks we can move forward on.
So you're talking 2021 rather than mid-year this year?
Well, mid-year this year, I'm thinking that we're going to have a budget document, and that with this direction to staff, my hope and expectation is that the staff will come back through the budget process in May and June and say, you know, we've heard from the committee a desire to see this budget reflect need to do items in the airports. And so that gives us a report back through the budget process in May and June. I'm using that opportunity quite candidly to make sure we get a report back, and also I'm using that opportunity to make sure we don't miss the budget process as an opportunity to put some tangible resources behind the needs that you've identified.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Mitra, any concerns or thoughts you have with waiting as far as getting funding approved? Because it's very rare that we get improvements made until we've identified money to pay for them. So my only concern with the 2021 proposal is that we take no action before the board has taken action to fund that action, and something happens during the next 6 months.
Well, there's a difference between considering improvements and things that need to get done versus liability issues, and I think your concern goes to the liability issues, and we'd have to take a closer look to see how critical they are, the extent to which they still exist after Rhodes' response, and perhaps we can, to the extent that liability issues, they'd be more appropriately addressed off agenda confidential.
Could I chime in on this again,
Please.
Mr. Chairman? I think, if I can, through the chair, look to Mr. Freitas. Mr. Freitas, My understanding is that even with a motion like that, your organization is still going to be taking whatever steps it deems prudent and necessary over the course of the next 6-7 months before we get a budget to deal with anything that presents a more immediate need. Yes?
Yes, if I will, through the chair. Perhaps now that I've had the opportunity to hear the discussion thus far, let me maybe fill in some gaps on what the Roads and Airports Department is doing proactively. So first of all, I mean, the letter that we received is clearly the way it's phrased and some of the assertions that are made in the letter. The FAA has kind of deviated from its standard way of dealing with the county as our regulator and is starting to write letters in a different manner. Yeah, is mic on?
No,
yeah.
Just closer to you.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So we did respond to the 9 items with a letter, but we didn't stop there. We've authorized, or we're in the process of authorizing actually our consultant, one of our on-call consultants, to evaluate the electrical system that supports the signage system at Reid-Hillview Airport, so that we can, make a accurate and comprehensive budget proposal this year. We have pushed back clearly in our letter about the word safety. We obviously take safety very seriously, and we're the owner of the airport. The FAA, as the board acutely knows with the skydiving issue, they're more than happy to tell us what to do, but they're not interested in taking any liability. So we push back pretty hard on the word safety. The letter specifically refers to what they call vehicle, pedestrian, or pilot incursions. And we've been studying pilot incursions and keep track of vehicle, pedestrian incursions out there for years with the FAA. And we have not been able to identify patterns. However, of these 9 items, there are some that we clearly want to construct and do, and some of them that we essentially disagree with, just as Supervisor Wasserman described in a grand jury report. If I may, I would like to come back with a report to Hewlett in January, responding to all 9 items and telling you specifically and in more detail and in an opportunity where we can discuss it in an open forum what we feel about the condition of our airport. And then we can use that. And January is a good time because February our budget proposals will be due. We'll have the benefit of the analysis by our consultant, so we can package that with the committee's direction, our consultant's evaluation, and the staff position, and I think we can have a coherent conversation around that and ultimately result in a budget proposal, which we're keen to do and keep our airport in good condition. So I'm sorry if I went on a little too long, but I was trying to distill that conversation into one action.
No, I appreciate that, and yes, I would like it to come back in January. That'd be great with your approval, Supervisor Simidian. And when you refer to the electrification of the signs, I know some of the concerns by the pilots at Reid-Hillview was specific about signage. And are you talking about the same 2 things or 2 different things related to signage?
Well, there's a number of assertions in here. Of the 9 items in here, 8 of them have to do with how aircraft move around the airfield.
And you're referring to the safety reports by the pilots?
No, I'm referring to this letter from the FAA.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's one of these items, actually the last item, called the segmented circle. That has to do with how aircraft navigate in the air. Okay. The other 8 of them have to do with how aircraft navigate when they're rolling around our airport. A lot of it is wayfinding and regulatory. And among those 8 that are remaining, 7 of them are within the FAA's purview of when the air traffic controller takes control of the aircraft, meaning it's in the taxiway or runway area. One of them is actually over in the FBO areas, really areas that we concern. We have an answer to all 9 of those items, and we're ready to present those to, we'll be ready to present those to the board in January.
Super.
And yes, some of the signs are electrified because they have to have backlighting so that they can be visible at night. So moving a sign involves actually a modification to the signage and lighting system on the airport, and it's a long system. right? It's a mile long with conduits and, and all the, so that's why we have a consultant out there evaluating that.
Good enough. Let me end this. What I will ask for, Harry, coming back in January, is a response to the FAA letter, and I'll make sure that Francisco, with my staff, forwards any other, be it from the pilots, be it from whatever other entity it is, so that you can address all of them. There may be duplication between some of the reports that come in. There may be some that this organization brings up this item, this one brings up this, they both bring up that. But I'd like them all to be addressed and responded to in our January Hewlett. Okay? Thank you. Supervisor?
They understood, yeah.
Thank you. I think that was very helpful, Supervisor Westerman, and I'm happy to incorporate that sort of expanded direction into the motion if you think that would be helpful.
That would be helpful. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, having that on the record. Thank you. All right, and we don't have any speaker cards, so Frank, we will consider this item received. Thank you all. Item number 6 now we move on to. And Ms. Helgerson, I've got a card for you. Come on up. This is to receive a report from the Department of Plan and Development relating to the status of Lehigh Quarry, Stevens Creek Quarry Reclamation Plan Amendment applications and notices of violation. And again, anybody else wishing to speak on this item, submit a card like you are right now. Come on forward, and then your time will start. There you go. Anybody else who wishes to speak on this item or any other item, please fill out a card.
I thought Rhoda was going, I don't know what she's doing. Okay.
All right.
I should get 3 minutes, but, okay. I'm going to be attending the afternoon meeting with the 675 pages of the annual report from Lehigh. There are so many things going on with Lehigh and the Stevens Creek Quarry. I don't know where to begin. It's outrageous. You have to set up meetings, and not just Joe Simidian's once-a-year meeting, okay? We need to sit down and talk this over, all right? Because we're not going to come up with conclusions. Everybody's scattered all over the place, and that includes the staff here. That includes the water board, the air district. And Air Resource Board should be involved in this too, but they're not, and I've contacted them. The state mining should be involved, and you have to understand, if we don't get an open communication with you folks, we have to be able to have open conversations back and forth, because we're not solving anything this way. We cannot have another 100 years of Lehigh and the Stevens Creek Quarry. No more mining, no more cement making, shut them down, clean up the mess, get the Superfund site people in here from the EPA. The Santa Clara County should ask for this. That place will not be cleaned up. It will be covered up. You cannot cover up this polluted, dangerous mine waste. You cannot cover up this stuff. Bring it all down to ground level, bring the quarry up, fill it up, bring the quarry up, level it out, and build houses there. Clean up the mess and get rid of the cement plant, and you can use the treatment plant to actually treat the water for the housing projects up there and Stevens Creek Quarry's housing projects. It's time it ended. Destroying 600 acres and 30,000 trees. No, open it up to a park, the lower end, the south end. The northern end, build housing projects up there. Not big mansions, housing projects for low-income students, teachers, you name it, apartments, small apartments. This is something you can do. Have me come in and sit down and talk to you people about this.
Thank you very much.
Please.
Rhoda? Rhoda Fry?
Hi, I'd like to highlight a couple of items in the report and expand on others in random order. Stevens Creek Quarry are overmined their property. Now, in order to stabilize the quarry walls, it intends to gift itself more quarrying rights, leasing land from Lehigh, and nearly doubling its footprint. They should not profit from their misdeeds. Furthermore, nearby residents expected the quarry and its operations to a logical end. Therefore, it goes without saying that I am opposed to the operation becoming an industrial processing plant for Lehigh's overburden. Your report mentions that Lehigh is unhappy with the county's performance and intends to appeal to the state of California. At the same time, the city of Cupertino is also unhappy and has submitted a 6-page letter. Please read it thoroughly. Lehigh's paperwork has come with a couple of surprises. First, our swarmy neighbor claims ignorance of Stevens Creek Quarries' plan to lease their land and process their waste material. They've also moved my cheese for changing the CEQA baseline of our scenic views. Mid-Penn issued a similar complaint when Lehigh illegally built the East Material Storage Area, which is now leaching contaminants. You see, the 2012 plan allows a temporary increase in the height at the West Material Storage Area, so Lehigh is taking it as their baseline. That's disingenuous. And add onto the mountain of mining waste at the Jaeger yards with sediment going to Permanente Creek. There's just so much pollution for just maybe 24 jobs, according to the Department of Labor, at the quarry. And many of them are actually non-union, and they're importing out-of-state workers, so they're not your constituents. Consider also that California has 8 cement plants. 16 states in the United States have none, including Louisiana and Hawaii. Colonial America imported building materials from Europe and exported butter. We don't need the cement plant here in the Bay Area that pollutes our air and our water. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rhoda. Sharon Samijian? I'm mispronouncing that last name. How do you say it?
Simonson.
Simonson. Thank you very much.
My name is Sharon Simonson. I live at 1361 Harwalt Drive in Los Altos. I've also communicated with Supervisor Samidian's office.
Excuse me for just a moment.
Turn it up a little bit.
Through the chair.
Thank you, Frank.
I think the problem is people are using the microphone rather than the podium. If we can put the microphone through the chair, if you put the microphone back, let the clerk help you.
On the desk.
There is a built-in microphone on the podium.
There you go.
And if you just step up to the podium through the chair, forgive my instructions, but
Well, there's a very big gap
there.
here.
No, if you just step right up and speak up as you
Right.
can hear, and the clerk
Okay.
will also make the volume go up so we can hear you. I apologize for the interruption.
Let's
and
reset the time.
Thank you for that.
Okay. My name is Sharon Simonson. I live at 1361 Harwalt Drive. I've lived there for almost 20 years. I hike all the time up at Rancho San Antonio. I've become aware that you all are considering the expansion of this mine. I'm obviously very opposed to it. I'm just going to say, I don't want to go into a bunch of detail about what the applications say because I don't know enough about it to say it. But I do know that you guys are in charge of protecting our public health and that you're responsible to us. You're not responsible to them. You're responsible to us, and you're responsible for our quality of life, and you are letting us down. You need to regulate these people. I agree wholeheartedly with the previous speakers. These people should not be operating. They're polluting our environment. They have proven themselves to be bad players. They're not a U.S. company. They're a German company. They have no vested interest in our public health. These people need to be put out of business, and you guys are the ones to do it. And, you know, I just don't even understand why there's a question. When you look at what they have done, I did one little Google search online. It didn't even take me 30 seconds. I came up with so many answers about all the terrible things that they've done. They've been cited over and over. They've been sued over and over. How can you let this continue? And I also would say that I would concur with everything that the previous speaker said about the quality of our environment here in the Silicon Valley. It is just horrid, and you guys are responsible. You're responsible for protecting us, and you're not doing it. Corporate America has polluted Silicon Valley for 50 years. There are Superfund sites all over Silicon Valley. You're letting another one develop. You are responsible. And I'm telling you, you cannot hide behind your public office. You personally have moral and legal and ethical liability. You do. You will answer for what you do, as will everybody else in this life. Okay? So I'm going to be watching, and I'm going to be taking action, because I'm so disappointed.
Thank you. Mr. Gary Latshaw? Did I get that last name correct?
Pardon?
Did I get that last name correct?
Yes, you did.
Yes?
Very good.
All right, thank
Get
you.
an A.
Clearly not, you're not
Gary
a doctor.
Latshaw, I live in Cupertino, a member of different groups, including one called Bay Area for Clean Environment, which is concerned about the cement plant. You're in receipt of a letter, detailed letter from the city of Cupertino. I'm not going to try to recount all those points. I will point out where you have failed us before, and I ask you to take that letter seriously and other objections. The past failure came out of noise complaints. The county hired a noise consultant. The Lehigh hired a noise consultant. Then the county hired a third consultant to overview the other two. And they said, well, there's no problem. The city of Cupertino, at its own expense, hired a sound consultant, noise consultant. He did what was necessary, which was to listen, put up a recorder for about a month. And then they found that, yes, there is noise from Lehigh. Lehigh responded, and they have crouched some fans that were on the tower. So this is a pretty straightforward problem that was addressed relatively inexpensively by some change in the tower fans. So I hope this time around you take what happened seriously and read the lengthy legal report that comes from the city of Cupertino and react accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other cards on this item, so we'll close the public comment portion of this item. Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you. Well, let me say thank you for the staff report to Ms. Untitled and her team, which I did find very crisp and helpful in terms of summarizing the status of various activities. There's a lot going on at one time, and I think that's going to make it a struggle, frankly, for members of the public to keep track of where things stand on each of these items. So I would ask the planning staff just to be mindful of that as the processes unfold on each of the various applications, and think about how we can communicate crisply and clearly. And that would be a challenge just by virtue of the number of issues that are out there, but particularly given their technical complexity and the fact that some of the applications are obviously intertwined. I think we need to think about how do we communicate with the publics and facilitate them communicating with us in a way that's crisp and clear. That's the first observation I would make. We do have in our packets the letter from the city of Cupertino. Is there anyone from city government here from Cupertino? Let me just say I thought the letter was very well written and helpful, frankly, in expressing the city's concerns. And Ms. Anshano, I guess, and Mr. Mitra, and if this is not appropriate for open session given the legal context, I'll understand that, but I will then ask for an off-agenda legal memo. There's clearly a big debate about whether or not there should be two separate reclamation plan amendments and whether or not that constitutes, I think the city's phrase, I'm looking at it, is illegal segmentation. Maybe I should just ask for an off-agenda memo on that point from County Council because it's a threshold question at the front end of the process, and I just think it would be helpful for the county and the board to be clear about the fact that that threshold question has been asked and answered correctly and that we've addressed it. I think it would be helpful, Mr. Chairman, as well, if we could ask that same memo from council provide us with some clarity on the extent to which past environmental review can or cannot be used in connection with applications going forward. And I know some of that is going to be very fact specific, but that also was one of the issues raised in the city's letter. There's also the suggestion from the city, or the assertion from the city, that in some instances a use permit is required either in lieu of or in addition to a reclamation plan amendment. And so if we could get some explanation of the legal basis for determination there, that would be helpful. And I'm sorry to be wading into the legal arena quite so much, but it's the nature of the process, I'm afraid, and it's certainly the basis for a number of the communications we've gotten from the city. There's a specific line in the letter from the city, and forgive me, the letter is not page numbered, but it's the second page of part 4. There's an assertion. It says, accordingly, the proposed offsite haul road and aggregate processing are not vested. This issue of vesting comes up quite frequently in these conversations. The board made certain determinations about vesting and about prior to my return to the board in 2013, and to grossly oversimplify a very complicated subject, and Ms. Anchano, you and I have had some of these conversations, the fact that a particular use or right is vested doesn't mean any and all uses or rights are vested, so you have to parse what is and what isn't. But as I say, there's a specific concern expressed here in the letter from the city about, accordingly, the proposed offsite haul road and aggregate processing are not vested. I think it's going to be important going forward to know what the county council's view on that issue is as a matter of law. And there are other issues as well. Goes on the same page to say shipping aggregate off-site for processing and sale even after decades of processing and selling that same material on-site falls well outside of Lehigh's vested rights. So I'm not trying by highlighting these points to limit the legal response from county counsel's office, but I am trying to surface these to indicate that they are matters of particular interest or concern. So I guess what I would, probably the easiest way to do it is to say, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have an off-agenda response from council, which may or may not be privileged, about the issues addressed in the city's letter, including but not limited to the ones that I've just mentioned.
Agreed.
Thank you. And then let me just ask of planning and/or county council, we've got a stipulated order in place now. Yes? No?
Rob Eastwood, Planning Manager. The department has issued a draft stipulated order to comply to Lehigh, but it has not been executed.
And when we say it's not been executed, that means both parties have yet to sign it and agree to it?
Correct.
And if they do sign it and agree to it, what happens then if somebody doesn't uphold their end of the bargain, if they don't comply once there's a stipulated order in place?
Well, defer to legal counsel, but it's a legal agreement on a compliance action, and if it's broken, I'm assuming they would be subject to legal compliance remedies the county could enforce.
Yeah, I think, with all the understandable anxiety on the part of all parties here, I want to try and plain English some of this. So in plain English, we've got some folks who are saying there should be consequences if someone fails to follow the rules. Okay, that's conceptually, I think, something everybody would agree to. So I'm trying to get a sense of, in plain English, what are the consequences if there is a stipulated order and then somebody doesn't comply? Then what?
I know our normal tools of remedy are fines that we issue to violators. We could also, if there's non-compliance with the compliance order and a legal agreement, I think we have the option to take the matter to court. Again, I'll look to our legal counsel if there's other remedies. It is a legal document.
If we can't get an answer today, and I don't say that critically, if we can't get an answer today, I do think that it would be good to get an answer that was not privileged, that we could share with the public about, all right, if there's a stipulated order and someone fails to comply, what then are the consequences of that failure to comply? understanding that there might be some judgment on the part of the county about what it would or would not choose to pursue in the way of a remedy.
If I may, Jacqueline Anshano, in the stipulated order, it says failure to cure the violations that are outlined in the order. The county may pursue all legal or administrative remedies against property owners under the county and state law to cure the violation. That's A. B is the property owner stipulate to the entire of the judgment. So then there's fees, as Mr. Eastwood has outlined, and it says that the property owner agrees to waive all appellant rights with respect to the stipulated order and judgment. So if you're looking for us to say we would take the permit forward with a recommendation of some kind, the failure to comply is outlined in the order. So, Steve Mitra, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Just
Mr. Mitra, you want to add to that?
Just quickly, we would, it's an agreement, and as Ms. Anchonio spelled out, there are remedies spelled out in the actual agreement itself. If you want us to provide you with a full range of options, equitable, other extra contractual options, we're happy to do that.
Well, the first thing I would say is thank you. Yes, I would. The second thing I would say is when we talk about fines and penalties, one of the things I've observed over the years is the first question we have to ask is, are the fines and penalties sufficient to compel the good behavior? So if it's a relatively modest fine that someone can and will simply absorb as a cost of doing business, then obviously it doesn't serve the intended purpose, which is to ensure performance. And so that's part of what I'd like to see as well is not only some dollar amounts, but whether or not we think these dollar amounts are sufficient to the purpose of ensuring compliance. I guess the next question I would ask through the chair is, what would happen if rather than enter into the stipulated order, the county instead simply moved to shut down the quarries, as some people have suggested? Do we have the legal authority to do that? What would the response be?
We have to look deeper into it. As mentioned, it is a vested quarry. The board determined they have vested rights to mine. They are required to have a rec plan, but there's no easy answer to that question. We'd have to look in further.
Yeah, but I try to be a little more articulate than I guess. Yes, but. Notwithstanding the vested rights, as we indicated earlier, the vested rights have some limitation, and notwithstanding the vested rights, even operation within vested rights requires performance consistent with federal, state, and local law, yes?
Correct.
Yeah. So if those are in some way being violated that is deemed to be more than de minimis, significant in some way, that can be the basis for a closure, yes? Rather than a stipulated order.
Could be. It would depend on the terms and the violations. And of course, if it's state and federal laws, we would need to coordinate with those entities.
And the likely response from the property owner is what in those instances?
Mr. Mitra?
Probably to bring some sort of injunction against shutting it down.
Okay, let me move on and ask again with the request through the chair for the information that I've referenced previously. How long did Lehigh have to respond to the current version of the stipulated order that you provided? Since we're not yet there, how long has this been?
Rob, Steve, Jack, whoever's got the answer.
We issued the order. I'm looking to Rob to confirm on which date? Draft order on November 8th. We have not received a response yet. As outlined in the staff report, Lehigh has separately issued an appeal to the State Mining Geology Board.
Is there a deadline date on that November draft by which the Lehigh is required to respond?
There is not. No, there is not.
So what happens then in a month or 2 months or 3 months if there's still no response?
I think the department's response would be if Lehigh is not acting in good faith to respond to the stipulated order and pursue a path of compliance, we have the right to pursue other remedies, which again would be fines and other compliance remedies to force them to move forward.
Okay, so now here comes the big question, I think. And thank you for your patience with letting me explore this out loud with the staff, Mr. Chairman. So the proposed order, stipulated order was sent, or draft order, I believe is the proper term of art. Yes, is that what you call it?
Correct.
Was sent when again?
November 8th.
Thanks. And the response thus far has been essentially to appeal to the state on this, yes?
Correct.
Okay. So in the absence of a deadline date, at what point does county staff believe that they have to reach the conclusion? I mean, look, I'm hoping we can work this out, but if we can't, I'm trying to figure out what the next step is. At what point do we feel that we haven't got a good faith response from the property owner here, Lehigh? December 8th has come and gone, so that's been a month. We're about to, enter into the holidays when there's likely to be a bit of a lull based on experience. So, when we're back here and it's January 8th, it will have been 2 months. If there's not a response by then, what's the department think?
Jacqueline?
Did you ask what do we think through the chair?
Yeah.
Let me interject. This is Sylvia Geigas, Deputy County Executive. There's not a specific and clear answer. What I would say is that the Planning Department and the County Executive's Office and County Council are regularly in discussion about this, and I don't think we're prepared to make a specific statement at this moment, but I want to assure you that this is receiving the highest level of attention.
I'm going to press on this a little bit through the chair. The phrase that you used was, at some point we have to make a judgment about whether or not someone is responding in good faith. If I said I'll get back to you on that, and a year later you still hadn't heard from me, you'd kind of figure I hadn't really been acting in good faith when I said I'll get back to you on that. Fair enough. So I'm trying to figure out how long, in the absence of a deadline date, at what time, because it seems to me we need to give, the reason for the stipulated order is because someone's not in compliance, right?
The only thing I'll add is
hang on just a second, please. The reason for a stipulated order is because someone's not in compliance, yes?
That is correct.
Okay. So we got somebody who's not in compliance, and rather than take more aggressive action, there's a good faith effort by our department to try and work it out with a stipulated order. Am I still accurate in the department's view?
Yes.
Great. Appreciate that effort to sort it out in a good faith way. At what point does the department then say, apparently the other party is not interested? And I'm not saying that about the other party. I'm just saying, at what point do we say, okay, that's not going to happen. We're going to have to pursue other approaches to solving the problem?
The only thing I'll add, and I know Sylvia wants to add in, we are unpacking the Lehigh's appeal to the State Mining Geology Board to ensure we understand what that is and in the appeal, and if in any reason the county would need to reconsider the NOV and stipulate order to comply before we make that determination.
I would also offer that we could provide an update at the January Hewlett meeting if that would be satisfactory to you.
And if I may, we can't answer your question right now, right here. You're pressing to have us say maybe 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It's a very complicated issue, and it just would not be beneficial to the public for us to just pull a number out and give you a number. So if we could come back in January, because as the administration, Sylvia, Mrs. Gallegos pointed out, this is very complicated. It's not as simple as us saying, in another 2 weeks, if we don't hear from them, we will take the following action. We're not in a situation where we can say that.
I'm going to respectfully disagree slightly.
Okay.
And here's what I'm going to say. we can't be surprised that we get strung along if we don't have an end date in mind. So here's what I'm going to say, understanding that the planning department has, and the county executive's office has weighed in. If after 3 months there isn't either a stipulated order or demonstrable demonstration of good faith, then I'll bring the action to the board. So if there's a lack of clarity out there about, because there's no end date, and again, I understand you're trying to work with people in good faith, and I think that's good. I mean, but there's a tension there. At what point are people abusing that good faith? I'm not prepared to say that today. We're 6 weeks after the order. But if after 90 days, someone hasn't stepped up and said, thank you for the opportunity to resolve this through a stipulated order rather than moving towards more aggressive behaviors, if after 90 days someone won't, and the chair will smile when I say this, someone won't take yes for an answer.
It'd be regrettable.
It would be regrettable. It would be unfortunate. And it would be disappointing. So that's what I'm going to say, is that at that point, hopefully that gives you some understanding. I don't want to catch you by surprise. Hopefully it gives the applicant or the property owner, rather, some understanding. But you get people who come.
And Supervisor, I see nodding from both people on your side, agreeing with you.
So, all right. So I'm going to then ask for, in the motion, which I'm hoping the chair can concur with, and again, thank you for the leeway to have this difficult conversation. I'm going to ask that we get the information I described earlier, some of which will come off agenda in a confidential memo, some of which I am hoping will be available for the public to understand the process. But I'm not incorporating in that, Mr. Chairman, my 90-day, 3-month expectation. I'm just trying to share that so that the staff and the public and the property owner, perhaps most importantly, know that within 90 days, if we haven't heard back, I don't consider that an effort to take a good faith effort by the county.
And for
seriously.
clarification, that 90 days started when the notice went out, not 90 days from now.
No, 90 days from November 8th, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that motion, I concur.
Thank you very much. There's more, but I'll let it go today. I think that's more than enough for us to get started.
Thank you.
And I guess one last question. I do think it would be helpful to put some context on this. So we do have a completed application now, an application that has been deemed complete, to use the legal term of art, for the expansion of the quarry, yes?
Correct.
Yes.
Realistically, not asking anybody to target a date, this is going to take at least a couple of years worth of process, yes?
I would say at minimum, we're likely looking at 2021. I can't commit to a date, but typically these take at least 9 months to a year to process.
Yeah, I think that's an optimistic best case scenario. And so part of what I want to do is help people understand that the process is only beginning, and that it will be a long process, and that there are other opportunities to weigh in, and that I hope they will weigh in during that process. But I think some folks sort of feel like the fact that there's an application that's been filed means it's a fait accompli, and that's not the case. All right. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the
Thank
support.
you. And we have one more late card that came in from Sharon Simonson, correct? I believe it was Simonson rather than Simons.
It's Simonson, Simonson. I've just listened to the staff report. I don't know what's going on here, but you guys sound like you are subject to regulatory capture. This is the weakest response I've ever heard. I don't know what this man does, but he should be removed. He is not exercising oversight. He is obviously in the pocket of Lehigh. The fact that these people continue to have a vested interest is a joke. How can you have a vested interest when all you've done is polluted and violated the terms of your agreement? They've been doing it for 100 years. When does it stop? When do you guys say no more? Yes, they've appealed to the state, but you guys are all representative. If we need to go to the state, then you need to tell us who we need to go to, and we need to talk to them about it. But I'm suggesting to you right now that your staff members are not working for us. They are working for Lehigh. I just heard it. I just heard it with my own ears. That was the softest, most ridiculous answer I've ever heard. And the answer from your council that we're working on, it's receiving the highest level, that is nonsense. This has been going on forever.
Thank you. I believe you already spoke on this item.
Could I have 30 seconds, please?
No, each person has the same amount of time is what we do here, so it can't, that would not be right to do. Okay, thank you. That concludes our public speaking portion of this item. Item number 6, Supervisor Submitting, you made a motion, I second it. I believe it was captured by all. Yes, Frank saying yes. The rest are saying yes. We move on to item number 7, which is to receive a report from the Department of Plan and Development, Department of Environmental Health, and Division of Ag relating to proposed agriculture employee housing program. And if I could cut to the chase is fine, and if I could please have IT come out here, both of our screens. Everybody else has gone off? Yeah, all of our screens. This for a PowerPoint is. Well, let me take just a moment here. There we go. I'm back on. Committee members, are your screens back on as well? Yes, thank you. Jacqueline, Rob, how are we doing? Michael? Supervisor Smidian.
Screen went blank again, but oh, no, there it comes. I gather there's a staff presentation on this, but if I could, a PowerPoint, but if I could just ask a quick question or two before the PowerPoint.
Please.
There's reference to, I want to go back to the piece of this that I've been pressing on, which is essentially the ability to pull up an RV and use it. Do I see now that the proposal is that that could be permitted for up to 180 days?
Yes, that's correct.
And now I'm going to ask you a question. If we said, you know what, we want it to be for 2 years, is there a state prohibition that would preclude that from being permitted? And if so, could you please cite the code section or the regulation?
This is Michael Meehan, Senior Planner. I don't believe that there is that restriction under 5 units, which is the state designation of agricultural, or rather employee housing from the Employee Housing Act.
So the reason I'm pressing on this point is because I think this is the 4th or 5th time we've had this item here. I understand that staff would not recommend a 2-year time limit. Do I have that right on this item? It's okay to have a difference of opinion, folks.
On the form of small-scale seasonal, that's correct.
Okay. But if the board, as a matter of policy, chose to provide that direction, notwithstanding staff's best professional judgment, there's no prohibition that would preclude it. Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right. Thank you.
Supervisor and staff, just for the record here, because I know we've got our PowerPoint up on our screen.
Yep.
But we're referring to page 1 of 3, the first of 3 pages. We're talking about small-scale seasonal column at this time. Is that where it comes under, Michael?
That's my understanding. There is a separate category which is the agricultural, temporary agricultural residence,
yes,
which would be allowed. That's in the past what we've discussed, allowing up to 5 years. The stipulation for 180 days is for seasonal units on site for no more than 180 days per year. That's targeting seasonal labor needs, and that is the category that staff is recommending be allowed.
Thank you. That first column, temporary ag, though, where you're saying that we're talking about 1 unit, though, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And the follow-up question I have is, I'm not sure if it's in your PowerPoint, which we're going to see in a minute, but on page 2 of 8 on the staff report, there is reference to, I'm looking at the second to last paragraph on the page, there is reference to caretaker. Ms. Gallegos has been hearing me loud and clear over the previous. It says, by enabling them to more quickly and at much lower permit costs provide ag housing to their workers, including caretakers. We have had some back and forth about caretakers may or may not be ag workers. How did that get resolved, just so I've got it crystal clear and frankly so we've got it in the record?
So the designation of temporary agricultural residence, which is outside of the ag employee housing, or rather it's not technically agricultural employee housing, and that's the category that we thought was relevant for the caretaker scenario, in which it would be allowed to have a caretaker.
So does that mean that the RV folk that I've described, this mythical creation that I've come up with, is going to be eligible if they're a caretaker? Yes, or I think I'm reading that the answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the ability to get those two issues clarified before we go through the presentation.
Thank you.
Excuse me, though, I do believe Mr. Ballier from Environmental Health wants to also respond.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to kind of clarify when we talk about the RV, you know, the options for holding tanks were outlined a little further down in the report. And at this point, you know, I think the proposal would be to utilize the integrated holding tanks in an RV as well, which would actually help get us around some of the restrictions that we have under our current ordinance, as well as in state, the state approval of our LAMP.
Understanding that, I am asking again, and I believe now I'll get another confirmation, I hope, that if the 180 days was in the judgment of the board, not as long as the board would like to go to, and the board would be willing to go to 2 years, there's nothing in state law that precludes us from doing that. That's what I was told 5 minutes ago, yes?
That's correct.
Great, thank you for that.
One other question, too, on the small-scale seasonal, the maximum 3 units per property. We were just talking a minute ago about the caretaker's unit. So is your recommendation that that caretaker's unit be part of those 3? We made it clear that the caretakers could be one of those 3. But is your intention to, with the 3, is your recommendation that it be 3 units, and if one of those wants to be for a caretaker, so be it?
The recommendation is that small-scale seasonal would fall under agricultural employee housing, and therefore there would be a requirement that they are primarily engaged in on-site agricultural operation, whereas the caretaker is really the form tailored to accommodate a caretaker would be the temporary agricultural residence. That would be allowing an RV on site for up to 5 years.
And that's Michael, that's 1 unit, correct?
Correct.
So under the temporary ag residence, maximum 1 unit, if that property owner chooses to make that 1 unit the caretaker, then there is nothing else there for seasonal ag worker. And if they wanted to do a seasonal ag worker, that would come under the small scale seasonal.
Correct, or small scale, or large scale seasonal.
Okay, and sorry if you said it and I missed it. And if you're under that 3 units per property, small scale seasonal, you're saying what you've proposed here does not allow for a caretaker?
Correct.
So would the property owner then have a temporary ag? Let's say you've got a property owner that wants to have a caretaker and seasonally has people that come to attend to the crops. Under the temporary ag residence, they could have 1 unit, and that could be a caretaker. And under the small-scale seasonal, they could have 3 units for their transitional temporary ag workers.
That's correct.
I'm good then. Thank you. Supervisor, you want to hear the report?
I think it would be helpful.
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, Committee Chair Wasserman and Vice Chair Simidian. Today we bring you information in response to a referral from this committee's hearing on October 31st relating to the use of RVs as ag employee housing, particularly on properties without on-site waste treatment systems. In doing so, we're excited to also share our overall approach and strategy in meeting the diverse needs of our ag community, of which RVs are but one piece of the puzzle. We have been working hard on this program for over a year now, and in close consultation with the diversity of our farmers, ranchers, and the ag worker community. So today's overview of the program aims to be brief. We'll first give you a bit of background, a summary of our approach, including a table demonstrating the permit streamlining, and then we'll discuss alternatives to on-site wastewater treatment systems, which we've teed off a little bit already, and get into next steps finally. So the origins of this effort are really coming out of the 2014 housing element, which included adopted programs and strategies encouraging the development of additional ag employee housing, including seasonal needs. This was confirmed through the Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan, direction coming out of the Agricultural Preservation Task Force, and the recommendations adopted by the board in January of this year, making the streamlining of ag employee housing a top priority. And it's also coming from changes in state housing and community development regulations, encouraging local agencies to streamline ag employee housing in a variety of ways. So our goal here really is to develop multiple strategies, understanding that there's a diversity of needs in the ag community that need to be met. So today, only permanent units and time-limited mobile homes are allowed under our code. Permanent units require a use permit. This entails over $14,000 in planning fees and 6 to 9 months of planning processing. No seasonal housing units are allowed. And when we refer to seasonal housing, we mean units that are themselves seasonal, not permanent units that are occupied seasonally. So clearly there's an opportunity to house seasonal workers in permanent units, and the way that we're classifying these are really whether or not the unit itself is seasonal on site or whether the unit is permanently on site.
I apologize for the interruption through the chair. It's just a term of art that's hard for me to wrap my head around initially. How does a unit be seasonal?
So if in many districts, RVs may be used seasonally in that they are on site for no more than 180 days, which is the proposal under our small scale seasonal.
And so I got the first part, and I just the second part. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That I want to make sure I'm understanding. The first part is we're not talking about the people. We're talking about the unit. Did I get that part right?
Correct.
Okay. And I gather the thing that makes a unit seasonal is that it's not a permanent structure on the ground. Is that
correct?
Okay. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it sounds like that's the easiest way for me to think about it. So if I can, within the course of a day or two, pick it up and move it away somehow, it's probably eligible to be seasonal, yes?
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. That may seem obvious to everybody else, but I was struggling a little with that. I appreciate it.
Christmas lights makes it holiday with different seasons.
So we do not currently, we do currently allow mobile homes. However, that's not in a seasonal capacity, it's in a time-limited capacity. So under a special permit, it is possible to come in and to request multiple mobile homes for use within a time constraint, at which point the applicant or property owner needs to reapply. So currently there's no seasonal housing, as we're defining it, allowed. And under the currently allowed options, only 2 projects have been submitted and approved over the last decade. And I should say that's only 2 projects in spite of growing urgency and demand from the ag community. It's very clear that there is a desire there. So we've got 3 forms proposed of small scale, which would be allowed by agricultural clearance, which would be an over-the-counter ministerial process without a planning permit. These are temporary ag residents, as we've discussed, small-scale seasonal and small-scale permanent. The distinction between the small-scale seasonal and permanent, again, is the housing type, and 2 forms of large-scale allowed by special permit, large-scale seasonal and large-scale permanent. So here's a table demonstrating in a different format the 3 units on top that currently are not allowed, or rather the 3 forms that are currently not allowed under our code, and those are all temporary units, mobile tiny homes, RVs, and the like. Below the 2 units there, or the 2 options there, small scale permanent and large scale permanent are currently allowed, and we are streamlining that. If it's up to 6 units, family units, or up to 18 beds in group housing, the reduction in cost would be $14,000, and the reduction in time would be 6 to 9 months. And the large scale, which would be anything above that 6 family units or 18 beds in group housing, would be a special permit, and that would result in a reduction in approximately $8,000 in 2 to 4 months. Lastly, we want to address the alternatives to on-site waste treatment systems. I believe Mr. Ballier can speak more to this, but as a summary, we are currently proposing that RVs would be allowed under 3 types: small-scale seasonal, large-scale seasonal, and the temporary agricultural residence. Our recommendation is that only small-scale seasonal be allowed without a direct connection to on-site waste treatment systems, and this is really a result of the costs and logistics involved in doing an on-site or off-site disposal of the waste. Our estimates are that on a monthly basis, on-site pumping of the wastewater could be between $500 and $700 per month, whereas off-site could be much more affordable at $25 to $125 per month. However, would entail the very significant logistical burden of removing the unit probably at a weekly basis for that servicing.
Michael, if you can take a breather there. Sylvia? Go ahead.
Let me just, is the presentation complete?
No, I asked him to take a break to recognize you with your light on.
Sorry, I probably jumped ahead. Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive. Before they continue with this aspect of the presentation, I wanted to provide the headline, which I'm not necessarily sure we're as crisp about. The headline is that through this streamlining process, we are substantially reducing the permitting time and the cost, and this will be a great benefit to all of our farmers, large and small, new and established.
Through the chair. Lest the response to the headline get lost, notwithstanding my question about caretakers and notwithstanding my question about RVs, I did get the headline from the staff report. A whole lot less costly and a whole lot quicker. Those are both good things. Thank you. Wanted to recognize that since I've been nudging everybody on these other more specific topics. Thank you.
Michael, please continue.
This is roughly the end of the conclusion of the report. I wanted to invite Mr. Ballier to speak to any of the constraints. As he mentioned, we did look at the possibility of using an above-ground holding tank, which would significantly reduce the frequency of needing to service an RV. However, currently, under our code, these holding tanks are designated a public health nuisance, which would require, as I understand, a change to the ordinance code in order to allow for these tanks, which also may or may not be successful at the state and regional water quality board.
Through the chair.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I heard that the impediment was our own ordinance, yes?
Yeah, Michael Ballier, Director for Department of Environmental Health. Yes, part of the impediment is through our own local ordinance, which can be modified. One of the things I want to point out, though, is that our ordinance is part of a comprehensive package that was approved by the Regional Water Quality Control Board back in 2015. And as part of that approval and as part of the statewide law and policy, anytime we make changes to the ordinance, we actually have to get regional board review and approval once again. And so that's the challenge that we face, is that currently, I can tell you from talking to some of my other colleagues who still have not had their lamps approved, the regional board is looking at a 2 to 3 year review time. And even then, they're also requiring additional, more stringent requirements. So opening up, the lamp for additional review and potentially additional, more stringent requirements would be a definite or possible scenario there.
Thank you.
You're just getting confirmation of that.
Yeah,
current
I got
and the process.
I got the information that I requested. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no speaker cards on this item. They've completed their report. Committee members, any other comments or questions? If none, we will consider your report received. Thank you very much for the direction in which you're moving. I'm much more optimistic and pleased. I think we're getting where we should get to. And Michael Meehan, instead of Michael M., you brought up a good point about showing how many had been approved over the last 10 years. And what we're trying to do is help ag. And this is just another way that we can do that by reducing the cost and the time. Michael B., I am a little bit concerned as far as the process of how many years it will take. But again, you don't get anything done unless you start. So I appreciate that. Supervisor Simonian.
Mr. Chairman, just a process question. If we receive the report, does this then move on to the full board at some point in the new year? Is that the plan?
I would think so. What, Jacqueline, do you think that's premature? Do we need to come back for one more thing?
We, as Ms. Gallegos mentioned, this is part of a broader package. It actually originated a year and a half ago with the Hewlett Committee on streamlining ag worker housing. Again, Rob Eastwood, planning manager. This is in our zoning ordinance. We are intending next to move the zoning ordinance to the Planning Commission, and from the Planning Commission would go to the Board of Supervisors.
So you need to do that before you could move forward on this. Thank you. So we'll look forward to that. Supervisor.
Thank you. I'm just going to work with my own staff to figure out if there's a way I can channel my interest in the narrow piece of this topic to and through the Planning Commission, and wanted to be transparent about that.
Good.
Thanks.
All right, that ended items.
Also wanted to announce that while my staff was in the room. So
almost ended item number 7. Candace, did you get that? Okay, yes. All right. Now we move on to item number 8.
And I'll speak, if I may, through the chair.
Please, Jacqueline, then we'll have speakers.
Yes, if I may speak to the REACH codes. We embarked on public outreach, and Michael Alvarez, our acting building official, has accompanied me in the endeavor to seek public response on how we're approaching our REACH codes. We had 2 public outreach meetings, one on Thursday the 12th here at 70 West Heading, and then we conducted another one on Monday the 16th in South County. We had a total of 10 attendees. On Thursday the 12th, we had 8 attendees, and in South County on Monday, we had 3. The overall recommendation that we received from, and responses that we received from the public, was their interest in the county going all electric. We put up 3 different alternatives for them to consider, and they really pressed us to consider making a recommendation to go all electric. We're still looking into that issue. If that's we'll present the options to Hewlett and the Planning Commission, and then to the Board of Supervisors relative to the codes and how the board desires to move forward. But the general consensus was all electric. And some of the issues that were raised were health concerns surrounding asthma and the particulates that are released from gas. We had some concern from the international community and the cooking community relative to having gas as an option for cooking. And so if Michael Alvarez would like to add any information that I might not have summarized in a manner that, please, through the chair, let me go back to Supervisor Wasserman. And
we're good now. We'll hear from the public first. Does that work for you, Michael?
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Gary Latshaw, come on back up. And Rhoda.
Good afternoon again. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I spoke before on this at one of the other workshops. Basically, I look at this more from a global perspective, and we have actually, as a global society, gone too far. There was a New York Times article about the necessity to try to save the Arctic from disintegration. The Arctic, as it breaks up, it is declining at its current rate. In 10 years. It'll be open sea, no ice during the summer. The heating there would be equivalent to some large fraction of human emissions, and that goes on for any length of time. And pretty soon we've lost complete control. By that I mean there'll be so much greenhouse gases released in the Arctic and fires in boreal forests that the contributions that the oil companies have let us down will be minor. So this is a good way to start to build an infrastructure that doesn't require greenhouse gases. The stickier problem, of course, is retrofitting, but at least let's start by looking forward and not allow it in the future. And I encourage you to follow many of your cities, including mine in Cupertino, to adopt a gas ban. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I'm Rhoda again. We are incinerating our planet. Now is not the time to make incremental changes. We may need to take transformative action. Just so that a restaurant can cook in a certain way or residents think that induction cooking doesn't work for them does not solve global warming. Our children are really depressed because of global warming, and of course global warming is depressing. We need to do something about it. I've been working with a number of youth, and I have a 17-year-old son, and it's really, our kids are depressed, and for good reason. So please do what we can, more than we can. Since, as you may have figured out, I'm kind of impulsive, I'm also going to mention Lehigh. Lehigh actually our air would be better off if they were burning natural gas. Believe it or not, they're burning petroleum coke, which is absolutely horrific. The company has declined to go toward more renewable fuels. I would also encourage the county to ask BACMed to do some studies and look at what the pollution and greenhouse gas profiles would be if Lehigh were to use alternative fuels. Obviously, there's a finance component. But again, this is not about money. This is about global warming and our only planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the gentleman that's approaching, I don't have a speaker card from you. What I'll ask is after you speak, if you would please fill out a speaker card, and that way we can keep the meeting moving.
Thank you. I'm Richard Adler from Cupertino, and I just would mention, just to follow up on Rhoda's comments, that the parent company of Lehigh, Heidelberg, is currently involved in a pilot project in Sweden on producing cement in a plant very much like Lehigh, entirely with electricity. And the early results are very promising. So not only, I mean, the switch from pet coke to natural gas is a partial solution. It looks like, in prospect at least, it might be possible to move toward an even more satisfactory long-range solution, which would be to move to electricity. And I think it's interesting that Heidelberg itself in Sweden is doing that. And I think if there's anything we can do to encourage them to do that in our county, which has already declared an environmental emergency, that would be a great thing.
Thank you. And I think Rhoda filled out a card for you, which you can just leave right there. That's fine. Thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion. Supervisor Submittee, I'll turn to you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I try not to do this too often, but for the speakers who are here, and I hope I can get their attention for a minute to the speakers who are here. Folks, I understand that you're here to talk to us about what we do today and going forward, but I do just want it of record when people come to us with a sense of urgency that, you know, many of us have been at this work for a very long time, including the staff people who've been doing good work in San Mateo County before they came to Santa Clara County. In my case, during my tenure in the California State Legislature, I was a co-author of the 2006 AB 32, the California Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006. That was really the landmark piece of legislation carried by my colleague, Assemblymember Fran Pavley.
Do they call it fossil fuel because it was so long ago?
Well, it was. What was interesting is I was also chair. Interesting to me. I was also chair at the time of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee, and as the bill was making its way through the process, the author, Assemblymember Pavley, struggled with the fact that she was getting some pressure from the governor's office to soften the contents of the bill. And she obviously wanted to make sure the bill got signed, not vetoed. And in the Senate Environmental Quality Committee, where I served as chair, we actually worked with the author to make the bill stronger, more rigorous, more robust, and force the hand of the governor. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean to say, if we're going to be serious about this, let's be serious, let's be real, let's not do something for show. Having said that, I also want to reference the fact that, I authored the 20% renewable energy bill in this state when that was a big deal. Today we look back over our shoulder and say, really, 20%? No big deal. But working with my predecessor, Senator Byron Scher, who was really the grandfather of renewable portfolio standards in the state, he got us to 20% by 2017. I pushed for 20% by 2010. Then I carried the legislation that got us to 33% by 2020. And again, I spent a decade on these issues, and the only reason we are meeting our targets in terms of global warming in this state and climate change are because of the renewable energy standards, because we sure haven't made the progress we need to make in other venues, transportation principle among them. So I appreciate your forbearance of my, walk down memory lane here, but whenever we have the conversation with staff or with members of the public, I think it may be helpful for them to understand that some of us have some history on these issues, and if we have a difference of opinion about whether we go slightly this way or slightly that way, it doesn't reflect a lack of interest, understanding, or commitment, just reflects a slightly different take on any different day. Now, we're going to get a presentation from staff, yes or no? Staff's just here to answer. All right. Then here's what I would say. I'm not sure we're going to get consensus on this at this point in this committee. My understanding was that it's going to go through the Planning Commission. Is that correct? Yeah? Not straight to the board from here.
Planning.
Yes, we go to the Planning Commission and then to the board.
Then I would suggest that we simply refer the matter to the Planning Commission, Mr. Chairman, without a recommendation, but ask them to look at the full range of options. That's a direction I would be prepared to make, because I think that staff has come back to us with some thinking about how we could make significant progress, even if we didn't go quite as far as some have urged. And I'd like that full range of options to be discussed and considered by the Planning Commission before their recommendations come to our full board.
Thank you, and I'll take that from there. Just if you finish.
Please. Oh, thank you again for your patience.
So, Jacqueline, when I hear full range of options, I like choices. Okay, and on the second page of the staff report, and Michael, the second page of the staff report here, item number 1 lists 3 what I consider choices, and the way I read the sentence prior to those 3 bullets is, this is not choose one from among these. What your suggestion is making these 3 choices available to the public. Am I interpreting that sentence after number 1? New residential construction would need to be wired to allow the use of electricity as a source of energy for all appliances and would need to meet one of the following 3. Is that correct?
Yeah, Michael Alvarez, acting building official. Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. It's funny. It's a little bit ironic. I've said it a couple times here before, but we often repeat ourselves. Yes. If you asked my kids how I define success, they would say having choices. And I'm going to use that same example here. I think it's extremely important that not only are these choices brought forward to the Planning Commission and ultimately to the board, but there are choices that we aren't asking for, pick one among these 3. I've spent time the last couple of months with architects and contractors who are very concerned about an all-electric mandate for new construction. One of the reasons being is that it costs more to do that currently now. That's the cost to build the house, which gets passed on to the homeowner, which makes housing more expensive. I think technology is changing in such a way that over the years the cost to do that will become less and less. Currently, for instance, it costs less to heat a home or use gas than it does electric, but they're improving in all those areas too. The idea of having flames in your home with a gas fireplace compared to electric, that's something. And I see exceptions here where it talks about gas or gas outside for a barbecue. So what I'm saying here, and I wrote a couple of pages that I'm not going to read from, but I do want to touch on, is I agree with Supervisor Simidian about this going forward. I just wanted to confirm that going forward was choices, okay? That these are three different ways to look at it. That being said, option number, third bullet, mixed fuel. What I did not have specificity on in my agenda report here, Jacqueline, and you may have it already, is the costs associated that would require, item 3 says you can have mixed fuel if the builder basically exceeds the regular energy efficient design ratings. So if they were supposed to meet a level of 100 through their windows and insulation and everything else, if they want to do mixed fuel, gas and electric, that they might have to be 110 or 120. I didn't know what that number was, but I can share with you that whenever you need to increase energy efficiency, let's say you go from R19 to R30, there's additional cost. If you go from dual pane windows to dual pane with argon, there's an additional cost. So I would like clarification as this moves through the system, where it says in bullet number 3, yes, you could do mixed fuel, but we're going to require a higher, I'll say LEED certification, but it's kind of the difference between going from silver to gold to plat is what it is. You need to raise the product. And I'd like to know exactly what that means, because I do have a concern, again, to the additional cost of housing. I do have a concern for the additional cost of the homeowner operating certain gas appliances as compared to electric. And again, I acknowledge this is improving all the time. My staff will tell you I'm a cup is half full kind of guy rather than, I heard that, Supervisor Simidian, a cup is half full kind of a guy.
That was an affectionate, respectful chuckle, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Rather than half empty, I like rewards rather than penalties. I like incentives rather than being punitive. For instance, and I'll take the Tesla car, an electric car. Tesla car comes out, there's rebates associated with it because the electric car costs more than the combustible car, combustion engine car. I don't want a combustible car. There's certain manufacturers that produce regular cars, combustible, and electric, and the electric costs more. And there's some people that choose to do that. But as an incentive to go the cleaner, greener electrical way, it wasn't a penalizing on the one, it was a rewarding on the other. For instance, they said, we'll offer a rebate if you go this way, and we'll give you a sticker where you can go in the carpool lane just for being electric. But if you buy the gas version, you don't. That was, to me, rewarding good behavior as compared to penalizing, punishing what is now normal behavior. I won't call it bad behavior. I'll just call it normal behavior. The water district and San Jose Water Company. If you choose to go out and replace your perfectly working toilet that each flushes 1.5 gallons with one that uses 1 gallon, we, the water district or the water company, will give you a rebate. If you choose to tear out your perfectly fine landscaping to put in a drought-resistant one, and you spend the hundreds of thousands or thousands of dollars to do that, we will give you a credit to do that. That's what I'd like to see in any way possible as this particular item moves forward. I want people to say, hey, I'm doing the right thing, and it's costing me a little more, but not an arm and a leg. That kind of motivation. Lastly, and I'll end on this, I do need to have options in here, a particular property where I was just discussing yesterday with the contractor and with an architect. Horizontal like this, facing south is this way. Oak trees here, no sunshine. A solar panel company would say, not a real good site for solar panels. Okay? There's also areas, and this is in my hometown, historic district, where they have issues with putting solar panels on the front because it's in a historical district, which people can get through and they can get over that. But there are physical limitations where you don't have south-facing or south and west-facing property, or it's obstructed, that can't put that in. During the PG&E's random outages, which were not caused by storms taking out trees, they flicked the switch. A whole lot of people either turned on their generators or went and bought generators. There's the advantage of a natural gas generator is when your power's turned off, you can turn on your generator. The advantage of a natural gas water heater, at least the people who lost their power for a couple of days had gas water heaters, they still had hot water. Okay? You don't have that with electric. Now you can do battery backup, you can do generators. There's lots of ways that cost money that you can remedy these things. But since what we're asking people to do in new construction, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we're asking to build more and more housing, affordable housing, to help address our affordable housing crisis in Santa Clara County. I want to do all we can, not to be punitive, but to be rewarding. Okay. Thank you. I'll close with that. Supervisor, anything else you want to add?
No, I think, I do want to ask a question, relatively narrow point again. EV charging stations required for new construction. Did I get that right as part of the proposal?
Michael Alvarez, acting building official. Yes, there is a requirement for EV level 2 chargers for residential construction, level 1 and level 2. And then same with multifamily and for non-residential. There are requirements for additional parking places with that higher level of EV charging.
I want to stay on single-family residential for just a moment, if we could. At what point does a remodel of a structure trigger this requirement? I'm inclined to say fine on what I'll call truly new construction. But if we've got a structure that's undergoing a major remodel for an existing homeowner who suddenly discovers that even though he's got a hybrid, a bicycle, and a scooter that is required because he's remodeling his home, I think we're going to be asking ourselves, was that what we intended when we said new construction? So I'm trying to get a handle on that.
Right now, we're just looking at new construction, not rebuilds, so additions and alterations would just meet current 2019 California Energy Code.
If I may, Supervisor, for just one moment, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thank you. Again, in Los Gatos, for instance, if you take down 3/4 of the walls that you have, it's considered new construction rather than a remodel. So, to his point, in that particular instance, if the town or the city, even though some might call it a remodel, it's a percentage of walls that you remove, surface, square footage, that type of thing. So I think you bring a valid point up.
I think what I'd like to do is just ask staff to look at that. My preference would be we had to let a few slip through, but avoid the aggravation, resistance, pushback on this more progressive policy. I'd rather make it easier for people to embrace this more progressive policy by being a little more forgiving in terms of the definition of new construction being what I'm going to call really new construction, not just a major remodel. Doesn't mean I don't think it would be ideal to do it that way. It just means I think at some point you sort of ask yourself, what's it going to take to get the community to embrace these new trends? And I think if we say to people who really are building new structures, hey, that's our code, that's our standard, that's the way we do it, That's one thing. I think telling folks who feel like, what do you mean? I've lived here for 30 years. I'm trying to improve my home. I'm going to make it more energy efficient. Now you're socking me with something I'm not going to use for the next 30 years. I'm going to live here. I think you got what I'm talking about. I won't beat that dead horse. All right. So
Thank you. And we'll exempt the seasonal RVs.
Okay.
Yes,
I think that's our cue that we should move the item forward to the Planning Commission with
Thank you.
direction as indicated.
So
Thank you.
done. Frank, it's unanimous. That's done. This concludes 8. The rest were handled very efficiently through consent. And we're going to adjourn. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, he did in June.